we jump onto this portion of the presentation, I wanted to take a second and allow people to have questions on anything that Charles might have just presented on the WQX Storet Water Quality Portal overview. Does anybody have any initial questions? Okay, so what I'll do is I'll continue here. So I am Laura Shumway. I worked on this presentation with Charles Kovach and Alex Hepner, not Alice, Alex Hepner. He's also on the line. All three of us will be at the New Jersey conference, and we put this together to give you guys general ideas of where to start with WQX and WQX Web, and because that's always the first question. You know, it's a little overwhelming at first. So where do we start, and where's the best place to kick it off at? So my portion of the webinar. So the first point we want you to know is organize your data. So the first thing we have to do to submit the data is organize it. And one big way to organize your data is to get a database. So as our cohort Alex would say, spreadsheets are not a database. I mean, we can accept spreadsheets, we can put them into CSV or text files, but it is better to have a database to organize your data. Definitely stacks of paper are definitely not a database. I know some people are recording data on their field sheets and may not be putting that into their system. We need to get that into electronic format in a single location and in a standard format. And this format that I speak of does not necessarily need to be exactly like WQX. I mean, it would be beneficial to do so, but having all your data in a standard format will help data into WQX. WQX, the rules for getting your data in and the import configurations within WQX Web to get your data into the system can be reused, the WQX import configurations. Those can be reused to get your data in, so if your data is always in the same format, you don't have to worry about changing your import configurations to get your data in. And then this WQX Web allows you to store your data in the format that is best for your organization. So you can still, like I said, it doesn't have to be necessarily WQX format, but we can get it into WQX format via the format, usually if it's within logical association into WQX Web using the import configurations. Oh, okay. All right, our next point is get your data in electronic format. And, you know, a lot of people do enter their data from their field sheets into their computer, but one big problem we see frequently is labs submitting PDFs to watershed groups or tribes or states with their results. And that's very difficult to get into WQX because PDFs are not how we get the data into the system, and the labs can actually work with you to establish a format to get your data to you in Excel or in a WQX, even in a WQX format. Usually, we work with labs a lot. I know Alex specifically does, but we work with them to get it to you in a format that really needs very few minor adjustments, and then we get it right into WQX. So if you guys are dealing with that issue right now, feel free to contact us at the Storet Help Desk, because we can work with your lab, work with you, and work with your lab to get your data in a WQX format. So minimizing data entry errors. So with manual data entry, there comes a high propensity for getting data error. One big way to limit that is not converting data from PDFs into Excel, so making sure the lab gives you data in Excel or format for your database or in WQX format, and getting data straight from your data loggers. So some people have continuous data loggers, for example, or just SONs that'll store their data, and being able to take the data straight from there into WQX, as in we work with those formats that you're getting it out of your, and we can map them using the import configurations to get them into WQX, and then we limit your data entry errors. And then we understand that even source files have data entry errors, and labs do errors, but we're controlling for those as much as we can within the data entries. There are always going to be errors, but we're trying to limit those. Okay, another thing we would like to stress is QA/QC prior to then getting your data into WQX and Storet. So our data management approach is that we are assuming that you have performed all the QA/QC prior to submitting your data to Storet via WQX. So we like to give you guys some advice on how to QA/QC your data prior than getting that in. Some of you guys may be very experienced with this, and you'll have more ideas than what I'm about to provide, but it's always a good place to start for people. So one way to do it is applying QA/QC thresholds per characteristics. So for example, you check for values for pH within the range from 0 to 14. If it falls outside that range, you go back, you do your QA/QC, you fix the value, go back to your original files, or kick it out if necessary. That's one way to start working through your files. Method speciation. So method speciation is, for example, you don't have two different methods on the same type of phosphorus sample. So labs probably are running the same method continuously for phosphorus for you. And for some reason you documented a different method. So it's just another way to check and just making sure, hey, all my phosphorus, they have the same methods, or all my dissolved oxygens, well, that's not exactly what we're looking for, but nitrogens have the same method speciations. Unit of measures, having a consistent unit measure through your data, so having percents or milligrams per liters for the correct DO measurements. You also could validate any of your results against your thresholds during batch, import, and manual data entry. Configure data defaults values for numerous data elements associated with an analyte result value. So this is two ways you can do default values on your information. So you can do a default value in your database. So if you decide to set up a database, you can do a default value that, every time you get a phosphorus, you're going to anticipate, especially if you're in a specific region, that it's below the quantitation limit. You can do that. But if you put in a value, it no longer counts that default. Well, you can also do stuff like that with your import configurations when you're aligning them with your data sets, bringing them into WQX Web. You can put in a default value unless you provide a value otherwise as well. So these are just other QA/QC, time save, reducing error type methods. Another word for the wise is managing monitoring locations. The way you get your data into WQX is you submit your project's information, so the reason why you're submitting data to Storet. Secondly, you then import your monitoring locations. So monitoring locations, all your results are tied to one monitoring location. So you'll often sample the same physical location multiple times, but you don't want to have different latitude, longitudes for every time you go back to that same station, because if somebody's looking for data, they'll only have data per lat long, and if that continues to be just a little bit different, they wouldn't know, the user of the data wouldn't know to be able to batch that data together to do an analysis, as well as keeping it all straight on your end. And then this is another issue, is that over time new samplers return to old names. Trying to keep a consistency there within your organization. Sampling for multiple programs. Some people will do different monitoring locations for 106 and 319, but we really can combine those. You can put that in your project level to divide those up. And then, like I said first, the different lat-long issues. Right. Sorry, I'm allowing somebody in real quick. Okay. And then how to fix those issues with your monitoring locations. So we suggest you maintain a consistent list of monitoring locations in your local or cloud database. You can limit who can create new monitoring locations to avoid duplicates. So you can put that on your database then and limit to allowable values, and only some people can add values, such as new monitoring locations. Use GIS tools to identify duplicate locations. So you guys can use anything from Google Earth to ArcGIS Desktop to find ways to mitigate those location inconsistencies. And then develop procedures for merging duplicative monitoring locations, because most people will find that when they start parsing through their data, there is a lot of data. There are a few monitoring locations that may be actually very similar, and having a protocol to deal with those and whether or not you establish a new station. Okay, another tip is when you're working in Excel, because we do work with Excel a lot, importing into WQX, that watch for Excel field defaults. So this is a way to get familiar with formatting within Excel, different data types within Excel. It will convert anything that looks like a number into a number unless you tell it otherwise. So for example, we have a county code field. County codes usually have, they can be 3 characters long, and most of those numbers will start with a 0. Well, it sees 032, it usually converts it to a number and puts it as 32. Well, our allowable values for county code are 032, so it would kick that value out of our system because it doesn't contain that leading 0. That leading 0, for helping you for that, to keep that leading 0, you convert the format to a text field, right-click, format cells, and you convert it to a text. But we really just hope that you avoid using IDs that start with a leading 0 so that we can reduce data entry errors or uploading data. Let's continue on. Another issue we run into a lot is that people will put white space or divider rows or columns into their data sets to make it easier to read. We like to strongly urge against that because especially rows will cause divider rows will cause issues when importing your data, and it makes it harder for us to format import configurations around that. So data should be delimited in rows and columns with no white space or empty rows. It may, like I said, it may help a human reader to understand or find particular data, but the row is not result data. That's just a word for the wise there. Okay, and then here's an example of what those might look like if you're not sure if you have these white or divider space rows. We can always account for that differently within your new database. And if you have an issue like this, feel free to contact us and we can help you design around that. One of the last Excel issues that we see a lot with people's data sets is that they will have the date and time in one field, and WQX will not accept that. So it needs to be separate into 2 different columns. And sometimes you can see behind the date, it's showing the date, but it also has the time associated with it as well if you look at the formatting. So we really need those to be separated within 2 different fields, collection date and collection time, to be imported into WQX format. So in summary, organize your data so that we can have a starting point when we all meet up in New Jersey. Manage your monitoring locations and develop protocols to deal with duplications or location name errors or latitude, longitude issues. Work with your labs and data entry points to catch data entry errors before they become final. So work with your labs to get your data in WQX format or something close, or even in Excel if all else fails. Usually you can work with your lab, or as Alex might say, shop around if you have to, if they won't work with you. And then also remove white space or divider rows or columns. So before we move on to the WQX rules, into the next set, I wanted to pause here and see if anybody has any other questions about data management or getting your data ready for WQX.
This is Stan. I just wanted to make a comment that sometimes you can use the power of Excel to use the count function, for example, so you know how many counts you've done at particular sites or on particular days, and that might be helpful.
Absolutely. Yes.
This is Tally. If we have a question, do we just jump in? Are we all unmuted?
Yes, you're unmuted. So go ahead and we were running the presentations that we could go through the slides, and if folks have questions, absolutely.
Okay, that was a test. I don't really have a question.
Okay.
And you may have said this, I jumped on a little bit late. These are being recorded. Will you be sending out the recording, or how do we access the recording if we need to watch the beginning or the end if we miss it?
Yes, absolutely. We'll make that available and send it out to everybody.
Wonderful, thanks.